All right, hello again. It's time for our final scheduled daily briefing for this week. This is Friday, June 26th. Pleasure to welcome you to the radio waves of KLAM or KCDV or to the YouTube channel, wherever you're hearing it. These are on the air in the 1 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m. hours on the radio. YouTube.com/Cordova TV for the archive and listening on demand. Mayor Koplin is our guest, and so we'll move forward with our conversation on today's Daily Briefing. Well, Mayor Koplin, we come to the end of another week here. What, 16, 17, what week are we in?
I want to say 16.
So do I, but it all seems so very similar. Why don't we actually, let's start with the most recent testing numbers, which are hot off the press. How's that going?
You bet. So as of midnight, 24th, we had 3 active cases, 1 recovered case, and we've conducted 1,107 tests. So we continue to do aggressive testing.
Yeah. And in fact, the state is probably going to, if it hasn't already, is probably going to hit the 100,000 mark today. So again, a lot of testing going on. Our cases, of course, are all what the state classifies as non-resident workers, people that live elsewhere that have come to Alaska to work. It's interesting, Valdez reported a case, though, of an actual resident. Have you heard much about that? Are you in communication with them very often?
I did. In fact, I have been corresponding with Mayor O'Neill real heavily, first on marine highway system issues, but now on the pandemic. And but ironically, this one specifically we haven't touched base on yet. But I did read their city's press release with interest, and I guess my takeaway is that it looks like one of those what they classify as an unknown case, where they can't tie it to a direct contact with another infection. The contact tracing doesn't identify any contact that would have resulted. The individual was a city employee that was following good protocols both at work and at home. So I guess my only takeaway is this virus can pop up in unexpected places. And
so our best defense is to continue to do what the doctors are telling us we ought to do, I guess.
Precisely.
Okay, and any communications with other folks? I mean, you have people in Washington you speak with at the state level, and I always find those interesting. So anything new on that front?
I did. I sent kind of a delayed text to Senator Murkowski in Sullivan just to let him know that we had identified 2 active cases again as part of our screening plan. They were already in quarantine, but then went into isolation. So essentially just an update that our plan is working, because they tend to get their information off the media as well, and it helps them to get a little perspective on what's going on behind the scenes. Dr. Zink, of course, we've developed a relationship there as she came to Cordova and saw what we had in place here and has been holding us up as a model. And I just let her know the community's feeling, the incident management team and city council, and my feelings that, yes, this is part of a plan that's working. These cases are exactly the ones we want to find. And to just let her know that the community is not panicked over this, that we're taking it in stride. And that's helpful, because as these cases pop up, different communities have different reactions. And of course, it depends on whether it's a first or later case. So she just responded back. She appreciates that kind of feedback, and of course continues to hold Cordova up as a model of good leadership from the council and incident management team, and good protocols from our processors and businesses and community.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's continued to be a very important figure in the state's overall response. I don't know if the Dunleavy administration is doing one of their briefings today. I've kind of lost track of what their schedule is, but it is interesting to see that, and it's always hard to put in any kind of perspective, but it does seem like the virus is being discovered more. I was going to say is becoming more active in Alaska, but that's always hard to tell with the continued increasing in testing. You're always going to find more cases. But I mean, like for example, over the last 24 hours, between the resident and non-resident cases, the number was like 44, which is different from, the zeros and the ones and the twos that we had a while back. I mean, as a member of a response team and as a mayor of a community, what do you think when you hear numbers like that?
I have a couple of thoughts, and I've been going through this thought process myself. What does this mean? The scientific method is you experiment and then you draw conclusions. And you do that under very controlled circumstances where you just change one variable at a time. And so we have a pandemic and a virus that we, really know very little about and have very little tools to manage. We've been learning a little more. There's things we think we're learning, but now we're in a situation where we've changed several variables. We've relaxed local conditions and requirements. We have many more people coming into the state under new sets of requirements. We have much more widespread testing, and we've been tweaking our mandates and protocols at every level, from community to state to national. And there's just too many moving parts to know whether whether there are more infections or we're just seeing more, or a little of both. And so then you say, well, how do you develop policy, or how do you respond to that when you really don't know what's going on? And I think the answer for Cordova is the protocols we have in place are not impossibly restrictive. They're inconvenient, yes. There's arguments about, whether they should be enforced or a mandate or a request. But the fact is, we have people are following them for the most part. Businesses are following them, and it's working. We're not having cases or outbreaks here with our highly transient population in our industry. So, my rule of thumb is, if something's working, don't change it. And I guess that's where I kind of land on it.
Yeah, well, and of course, while we certainly have concern for our fellow Alaskans, and anything that we could do to help them, we would want to do, ultimately, our community is really all that we can. I don't know. Control is not, but influence. I mean, it's what we do for each other in our town is ultimately what our results will be based on. So while it's tough to see the bigger numbers, particularly with so much uncertainty and not really knowing what they mean, ultimately the best thing for Cordovans to do is continue to do what appears to be working. Exactly.
And to recognize that we have differences of opinion here, and a lot of flexibility in our personal decision making. So I don't know that anybody's in a place where they can't make decisions to execute their perspective. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, it's we so often we have to fight for euphemism these days. Well, I've enjoyed working with you for yet another week here. Anything else before we wrap up and take a couple days away from these visits? Unless, of course, something funky happens.
No, it's great to see some good weather again. I encourage the community, I guess, as an ending note, to patronize our local businesses. It's a rough summer for us. Our fishermen, our core industry, is not going well, and the outlook isn't good if it doesn't improve here soon. So I would encourage people to shop locally, use local services, help each other out in the ways we can. We've been supporting each other through health care and considerations, but we also have the economy to think about. And so that's going to be the work of the community going forward. So.
Yeah, well, and it's worth mentioning, too, that the state just put out some new assets for, I'm trying to remember if it was businesses, new resources, and this is probably findable maybe through the city's website, but new resources for Cordova businesses to encourage, COVID-19 precautions to assist with ongoing safe operations. So, we're talking about, it seems to be working, keep doing it, want to patronize the local businesses. These are some new assets, these things that can be printed off to, I guess, help encourage COVID-19 precautions among employees and customers. And I bet the chamber would have information on that too. I assume they continue to be very receptive to business and citizen queries about how to proceed.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, then we'll encourage people to visit the city site, of course, visit the chamber site. The state site has got new things coming out, so anybody that's curious about what to do, at least as far as what our elected leaders and their staffs are recommending, there are a lot of good places to look. And Mayor, will, like I say, unless something goes sideways over the weekend, we'll catch up with you again maybe on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll call that good for another week of the Daily Briefings on KLAM and KCDV, 1 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m. hours on the radio, and then our companion asset, the Cordova TV YouTube channel, youtube.com/Cordova TV. If you ever want to be able to hear one of these at your own pace or on your own schedule or share our information with others, you're welcome to utilize that. Hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in. We'll get regular programming back underway.